Hi, y'all. My name is Krista. I'm a very grateful Al-Anon. I think I'm okay. They can see me, right? Okay. Sometimes they can't. So I want to thank my host, Erica, for picking me up. And we had a lovely chat and dinner with Patty. It was just so fun. I want to thank Lance for asking me to come back. I have been excited about this talk since January. And the reason being is because you guys had me out here last year in May for me to tell my AA story. And so normally whenever I talk, because I like to follow the traditions and singleness of purpose, whenever I'm doing my AA talk, I never say that I'm an Al-Anon. I don't hint to it. I don't tiptoe around it. My goal is people to leave there thinking that I'm only a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Whenever I tell my Al-Anon story, it's the exact same. I don't say I'm a double winner. I don't say I'm involved in another 12-step program. I'm there to talk about Al-Anon. But now that the cat's out of the bag, you guys are going to get my very first double winner talk. I'm going to tell my real story from beginning to end. I'm not going to leave anything out. I'm not going to step around anything. I'm just going to tell you the whole truth as it really happened, and I'm super stoked about that. So I have been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 29 years, and I have been in Al-Anon for 28 years, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I'm from Dallas. Whenever Lance just asked me what group, I said Preston because that was my AA group, but my Al-Anon group is actually Addison. And we are online, we're on Zoom, and I go Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. If you're interested in joining us, please grab me after this, and I'd love to give you our little Zoom login. Or you can get it from Lance. Where is Lance? Did he leave? Oh, okay, you're hiding from me. Okay, thank you. Yeah, if I start slipping down, come get me. So, I'm going to start at the very beginning. I'm from a little tiny West Texas town. I was born in Pampa, Texas. I did most of my living in Amarillo. My parents, they were from Pampa, and they dated all through elementary, junior high, and high school. They got married. They were married for about 13 months, just long enough to have me, and they got divorced. They got remarried almost immediately, and so I had these two full and complete families. I had my mom and my stepdad, who I lived with most of the time, and they were the alcoholics. I called them that because they called themselves that. They were like, we drink like this because we're alcoholics. And then on the weekends, I would go to my dad's house, and my dad and my stepmom were like Ward and June Cleaver. They never cussed. They went to church. They ate dinner at the dinner table. Everything was just so. And at my mom's house, my name was Krista, go give me a beer. And being the good little waitress that I was, I always brought that beer opened, and I'd have a little sip. So I don't remember my first drink. I can tell you that I was born old and worried. I've always been exactly like this. I came out 52 years old. And I would have family meetings, and I would set my mom and my stepdad down, and I would be like, listen, you guys need to turn the stereo off. You need to get your friends out of here. If anybody gets naked in the front yard again, I'm calling Grandma. We got to go to bed at 10 o'clock. I have got to go to the second grade tomorrow. And they would be like, okay, you're right, we'll try. But then Friday would come, and everybody knows what Friday brings. Lance, darling, could you get me a little sip of water? Thank you very much. So, I spent most of my childhood I would walk into the room, and I would take everybody's temperature, and I would try to feel everybody out to understand who I needed to be in that moment. Do I need to be the referee? Do I need to be the counselor? Do I need to be the parent? What needs to happen here to keep this show on the road and to keep this car from driving off into the ditch. And I learned very, very early on how to deliver bad news with a beer. I learned there was always music at our house. My stepdad was a huge music fan. And so there was music 24/7. And I remember coming, I'd be playing out in the front yard, and then I would come home and I'd hear the music, and I would stand outside the door to listen to what kind of music it was. Is it the Eagles? Is it Led Zeppelin? Is it, what kind of a mood am I walking into right now? Is it, Conway Twitty? Because each one of those bands brought a whole scenario. And then, I also, I lost myself in that. And I didn't know where I started and where they stopped. And I started very early on starting to live outside in. And whenever I was in the 4th grade, I went to school one day, and the principal called my name over the announcements. And they called me to the principal's office, and I, of course, thought I was going to get swats. And so I'm crying by the time I get there. And whenever I walked into the office, there was the TV reporters were there, and the magazine people were there. And I thought, my God, they're going to film this. I'm going to put this on the news. And it turns out I had won a national art contest. And so my teacher, my class teacher, just turned in one of my regular projects into a national art contest and did not tell me. And so, I won a big art scholarship. I was on the news. I put my painting on billboards across the country. And my parents were like, oh my God, look what we did. We made a bright, shiny star. And they enrolled me into college course art classes. I'm 11 years old, and I'm taking these art classes with, 27, 25-year-old kids. And I already felt like an alien, and I felt like everybody wanted something from me that I did not have to give. I felt really responsible. I felt super responsible for making my parents proud. I felt responsible for holding up to these expectations for these, adults in my life. I felt, and I also felt responsible for the art. I was like, I don't even remember painting this painting that won all this stuff, and now they want me to do it again. And I felt like people wanted the essence of me. They wanted my soul. And so I did what I had always done. I went back to trying to blend into the walls, to just try to be invisible. Most of my childhood was about, I said to myself, boy, if I can just get through this, if I can just live through this, I'll be okay. And so I did. I just, tried to not make waves. I tried to just kind of get through it. And whenever I was a senior in high school, one of my dearest friends, somebody in our high school shot him and killed him. And it was not accidental. And I was devastated. And my mom said, do you want me to come with you to the funeral? And I was like, absolutely not. I need no one. I am a self-cleaning oven. I will be fine. I'm going to go to this funeral all by myself. I'll be fine. And so I was not fine. I fainted on the church steps. And whenever I came to, my mom was standing over me. And she had been following me all day long that day at a safe distance, just seeing just in case I needed her. And I wondered how often she did that. And I say that to say this. Thank you so much. When you get nervous, you get cotton mouth.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
water.
Thank you, honey.
And that's water.
Just in case. Thank you very much. The only thing I ever really wanted to be was not an alcoholic like my mom. And I just want to say here that I'm gonna. So anyway, this is weird for me because I'm like, okay, I don't have to skip this part. I can say all the things. So I didn't want to be an alcoholic like my mom. So I spent a lot of time trying to not drink at home, even though it was always available to me. There was never a time that it wasn't okay for me to just go to the refrigerator and drink a beer. But I knew I wasn't supposed to do that if my grandparents were there or, if there were other adults there. It was one of the many secrets that happened in alcoholic homes. I remember slamming beers in front of the refrigerator one time with Shelly Belly, the little girl across the street, and I told Shelly that if you drink this long enough, you can feel it tingle back down the backs of your arms and your legs, and she could never feel that. And I just thought she wasn't doing it right. And but also Shelly wanted to go jump on the trampoline, and I wanted to stay there and keep slamming beers. And I remember that so clearly. I was like, there is something really different between me and Shelly. Anyway, so because I didn't want to be an alcoholic, I didn't participate in that. I didn't get into a lot of trouble in high school. I was born old and worried, and I was born with a boyfriend. I always had a boyfriend, and boy, were they a nice distraction. And I got out of high school early, and I got a job at the bank, and I was a teller, and I stole somebody's ID, and I had a fake ID, and I was off to the races, and I was finally able to drink the way that I always wanted to. And I started to have some small little experiences that really brought it to my attention that I had this other thing. I had a guy that I was working with. He was a good friend of mine, and at the bank, and he came to my house one day late at night, and he was crying, and I was like, I go, what happened? He said, well, my dad died, and I was like, let me go get my purse. We'll go to the beer store. And he was like, I don't want to drink. My dad just died. And I remember not being able to stay in the presence with someone with that much pain. I was feeling all of his pain. I did not know where I stopped and where he began. And I'm really grateful to have alcoholism. I'm really grateful that I got relief, from that for a while until it stopped working. So I'm working at the bank. I met a guy there, and he said, we're all going to go out tonight. You want to go with? I go, sure. He said, meet me over at my apartment, and we'll ride together. And he sat me down, and he showed me how to give him an insulin shot in case he went into a diabetic coma while we were drinking. And so I moved in with him that night. Like you do. And because I don't know how you're going to watch them full time if you don't live with them. I stepped over that imaginary line during that relationship, and I started, to see, aspects of my mom in my behavior, and I'm sorry, I lost myself for a second there. Again, I've never given this talk before, so I'm not as polished as I normally am. So we're working at the bank, and I'm starting to experience the loneliness that they talk about in the big book. And I'm also really obsessed with him. And I'm managing his diabetes. I'm managing I'm trying to control and enjoy my drinking. He's having the time of his life, and I am sucking the joy out of every room I come into. And I am doing what I call chasing fun, and I just could never get to the fun. It was never the right kind of fun. It was never with the right kind of people. I was really dissatisfied. And I just thought that, boy, if I can have the right kind of fun, I will feel okay. And if I can get him to stop, start, quit, come, go, stay, leave, if I could get him to just do it right, I'd be okay. And so I really made that my primary project. And he didn't love that. And, we started to have these big rifts in our relationship. And so we had a big 3-day weekend at the bank. And I had been drinking around the clock for 3 days. And one night, or that night, I think it was a Saturday night, something happened that had never happened to me before. And no matter how much I drank, I could not get drunk. And I packed my stuff and I went to my mom's house. And my mom just happened to be up drinking. And we sat down and we cussed and discussed, and we figured out that he was clearly the problem. And I went home and I sat him down and I said, we are terrible alcoholics and we need to go to AA. And he said, you're right, you are. So back up a little bit. I had gone to a therapist, and I went in there and I said, my parents are terrible alcoholics and they've just about ruined me. And I could have the very beginnings of a small drinking problem. And I'm also stalking my husband, and I sometimes skip work to follow him around. And she said, I think that you should go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I did that, and on my first meeting, I walked in there and they said, are you new? And I said, yes. How did you know? And they sat me down and they started talking to me about the way they felt when they drank, the way they felt after they drank, and the way they felt before they drank. And all of that gender difference and all of that age difference kind of melted away, and I felt like those were my people. And they told me that I was the most important person there, that I was the lifeblood of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that they could not stay sober without me. I am getting to my Al-Anon story, but this has to come first because there is no Al-Anon without this. So I went back the next day because I was very worried about them. And I was the lifeblood of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did not know how they were going to stay sober without me. And so I went every day that week, and then on Thursday, I went and I brought my little notepad with me, and I said, I've been coming here all week and keeping you guys sober, and tomorrow is Friday, and I have never not drank on Friday. And I said, what do I need to do? And they said, you need to ask God to relieve you of the obsession to drink alcohol. And I said, what else you got? Because that's silly and that's never going to work. And they were like, what do you got to lose? And I was like, you know what? I actually have nothing at all to lose. And so I said that prayer. I said, God, please relieve me of the obsession to drink. And I woke up the next morning and I felt different. And I came back and I said, where do I join? Where do I sign up? What needs to happen? And they said, you're already a member if you say you are. And you need to work the steps and you need to get a sponsor. And so I did. And that first sponsor was perfect for me. She also was raised in an alcoholic home. And she also, was married to an alcoholic. And she also attended Al-Anon, and she was awesome. And I started, we worked the steps, and on my 1-year AA birthday, so that first meeting, it was 6 grandpas. And the grandpas got together on my 1-year AA birthday, and they sat me down, and they said, honey, we think you're a real alcoholic. We think please don't stop coming here. We want you to come here. But also you got to go to Al-Anon before you get us sick. So I started going to Al-Anon. in addition to, so I have 29 years in AA and I have 28 years in Al-Anon to the day. And in Al-Anon, I learned how to get the focus off of him and get it on me. And I started to realize how I was contributing to a lot of this, how I was, fanning the flames, and I started to get some different perspectives about my part in all of that, and a lot of my reactions to things, and I went through the steps in there, and I started feeling better, and I started to connect with my higher power, and all of that fear and all of that stuff, started to be removed from me, and I started to connect to Krista, and all that creativity started coming up. Because, see, I hadn't painted anything since I left that art class when I was 11. And I started dreaming about paintings every single night, and I started painting these paintings, and the better I got and the more clear I got, the drunker he got. And I had a case of beer in my refrigerator every single day for that year, and year and a half, I guess it was. And I had been in Al-Anon for 2 years, and I came home on a Tuesday afternoon, and nothing had happened. We weren't in a fight. He wasn't coming home very much, but I wasn't mad about it. I learned how to, be detached, and to keep my focus on myself and my own recovery. And I was, going through a lot of that, childhood stuff, and getting free from a lot of that. The first layer, it's taken a lot of years and a lot of layers, but that first big layer had come off. And I sat him down and I said, you know what, I love you, but I love me way too much to live like this. And I don't think I'm going to make it if I stay with you. And so I left. And I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. I didn't own a home or anything. I had no ties to Amarillo. And all this creativity was just bubbling up out of every pore. And I said, I think I'm going to go to Dallas and try to do something creative. And so I did. I went to Dallas, and I got a little job at a frame shop. And the woman that worked at that frame shop, she also did some art consulting, and she said, I need a local artist to paint a little abstract painting. And I said, I have never painted an abstract painting before, but I'll try it. And I brought it to work the next day, and a customer came in to get something framed, and she saw that art, and she said, I want to have an art show for you. And so, can you do 30 paintings? And in 3 months. And so I did, because a lot of that fear had been removed. And I had a sellout show, and somebody from a big TV producer bought one of my pieces, and they had my art on a TV show. And next thing you know, I have this gigantic art career. And while I'm doing all that, I am really enjoying being 365 miles away from my mom. And I'm not going home for Christmas anymore. And I'm not calling that much either. I learned along the way, when to call. Like, you call mid-morning. That's a good time to call. You don't call when it's dark outside. And even then, though, I was really having to make myself do it. And so I wasn't much. And my mom called, and she said, I got really sick, and I had to go to the hospital. I had pneumonia. And while I was there, they ran a bunch of tests on me, and they found out that I have breast cancer. And I have been taking chemo for a couple of weeks now, and I need to have a mastectomy. Would you come be with me during the surgery? And my first thought was, no, I don't want to do that. Number one, I didn't want to be an alcoholic like you, and the second biggest thing I didn't want is I didn't want to have to sit there and hold your hair back and watch you die of alcoholism and watch you suffer the consequences of your disease. But that's not what I said, because that's not who you have raised me to be. I said, I will absolutely be there. And so whenever I got home, my mom had, she came up out of that anesthesia. Well, first of all, let me just tell you that she weighed about 76 pounds. She was bald. She was gray. It just knocked the breath out of me. And whenever she came up out of the anesthesia, she looked her over at me and she said, "Take me home. Get me home." And I knew that she needed a drink. And something came over me. It was the voice, and it said, "You no longer need to withhold your love from this woman. She has suffered enough." Is there a bird in here? So I obviously could not take her home and give her a drink right then, but I did take her home a few days later, and I let my mother off the cross. And I just knew, I had some clarity come to me, and it was, if there was anybody that she was ever going to do it for, it was going to be me. And I started to understand the difference between the can-nots and the will-nots, because I'd been living most of my life thinking that it was a will-not, and I understood in that moment that it was a can-not, which is so interesting because I have the very compulsion and allergy to alcohol that she did. But, my littles that live inside of me, they don't understand that. They're looking for evidence. They're looking for proof of her love. And they're holding her to these expectations of all of the other mothers. And she's not the one that I wanted. And she's not, I have a whole huge laundry list of the ways that she didn't do it right. And I withheld my love from her, as punishment. And I recognized that that's the way I punished everyone, is by withholding my love. And it's the way that I punish myself, as I withhold my love from myself. So I wish I could say that my mom and I had this beautiful relationship after that, and that I called her and I went home for Christmas and we just skipped off into the sunset together, and that's not what happened. But what did happen was that I could hug my mom without wanting to peel my skin off. And I could call my mom because I wanted to, not because I thought I should. And I started to be able to separate my mom from her disease. And I started being able to see the woman in there, and started being able to see her good qualities. I had summed her up in this, she's an alcoholic and that's all she is. And I started to be able to let her out of that prison a little bit. So things are going better, and I'm living in Dallas, and things are going great, and I'm really active in both of my programs, and I'm in the middle of the boat, and I'm sponsoring people, and I'm being sponsored, and she calls, it's 10 years later, and she said, the cancer is back, and I just don't think I have the will or the energy to fight it this time. And I got to do the very thing I didn't want to do most. I got to walk my mother through her death. And I use those words purposely. I got to. It was one of the greatest honors of my life. I got to have conversations with my mom during that time because she couldn't drink. And she was as clear as I've ever known her. And I got to really talk to her and ask her about, what were your favorite parts of your life? What are, all the things. And we had hospice at the house, and she was laying on that mattress, and I was giving her morphine, and I didn't take any of it. And because of the work I had done in recovery, I too was all the way on my body. I wasn't smoking, I wasn't eating, I wasn't on Facebook, I wasn't doing Candy Crush, I wasn't distracted, I was right there with her. And I wish that I could tell you that I made amends to my mom. I wish I could tell you that I told her the truth, which is the way that I harmed you the most was by withholding my love from you. But honestly, I wasn't sure I was done doing it all the way to the end. And when my mom died, I guess it was about a week later, she came to me in a dream, and she was wearing sweatpants, and we two-stepped, which is so weird. And after the dance, she just started kind of, and this was a dream like I'd never had before, like I could smell her, I could feel her. I've never smelled anything in a dream before. It was so odd. And she started, after our dance, she started kind of backing up, kind of floating back into the background, and she stopped, and she said something to me in my mind, and she said, "We've had our dance. Our dance is done." And I feel like my mom came back to tell me that we were straight. And I can tell you that that's when the real work started. The real forgiveness work started then. You know, I had forgiven my mom, but I had not forgiven me. And so I started to learn how to let myself off the hook for all the Christmases I missed and all the things I didn't ask and not making that amends and all of that stuff. And I would say, and then in grief, you know, the grief process over that wasn't just about my mom's death. It was about grieving my childhood. It was about grieving how I had abandoned myself, how I had, you know, really turned myself over time and time and time again. And really, you know, I feel like the opposite of recovery, or excuse me, the opposite of addiction and dis-ease, which is what I have in my Al-Anonism, is connection. And I wouldn't connect, and I wouldn't allow connection, and I had to grieve that and forgive myself for that. So back in Dallas, my mom's passed. My stepdad drank himself to death 2 years later. And I just want to say here that I know that my mom died of cancer. That's what was on her death certificate, but you will never convince me that my mother didn't die of alcoholism. You know what causes cancer? Stress, really poor self-care, environmental things. Anyway, so then my stepdad died. He died of cirrhosis of the liver. And you know, I had to go through the whole grief process all over again, and I'm back in Dallas, and I met a guy on AA campus, got married, like you do, and he had like 25 years of sobriety at the time, and we started, you know, having a big AA recovery life together. And we opened a little art business together, and we are, you know, things are going great. And I guess about 5 years in, in my Al-Anon program, I had 2 or 3 or 4 Al-Anon sponsors, and I just couldn't get one to stick. I love my AA sponsor, and she's magic. And she was raised with a really toxic, codependent mother. And so she, you know, could speak into my life, and she could point at a lot of my stuff. And I got a lot of medicine from her, and I wasn't really, it didn't motivate me to get an Al-Anon sponsor because I was kind of getting everything that I needed until I didn't. And then, like I said, about 5 years into that marriage, I said, you know, I feel like I need more. I need different. I am going to climb into, I've always gone to 2 to 3 Al-Anon meetings the whole 28 years. Some people kind of drift in and out of Al-Anon, especially double winners. In my opinion, you have to be bleeding out of both eyes to go to Al-Anon if you're an AA. If you're bleeding out of one eye and you can still see through the other, you won't go, or you won't stay. And I was bleeding out of both eyes, and I really needed Al-Anon. And so about 5 years in, I was like, you know what, I think I was miserable. And I wrote a fourth step. And I called this woman, who I'd known, she had a long time in Al-Anon. And I said, hey, can I come over and read you this fifth step? And let me just tell you, I hadn't seen her in years. We don't talk on the phone. We're not like friends or barely acquaintances. And I'm like, hey, can I come over and read this fifth step to you? And she said, yeah, but why don't you write something on 1, 2, and 3 first? That way I can know you've done those steps as well. And so I did, and I went over and I read it to her. And she said, does this mean I'm your Al-Anon sponsor? I go, yes. And she said, if I'm going to sponsor you, I need to see you in meetings. And so that's whenever I started going to the Addison Zoom meeting. And and I'm not saying anything bad about the Al-Anon group that I had been going to for all those years, but there was something special about this group. And I started learning things in Al-Anon that I had never heard of before in my life. I started to, we worked the traditions on my relationships. And then I learned about the concepts, and I started using the concepts at work. And then we studied the legacies, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like the top of my head was blowing up. And things were really dramatically changing in my life. And, I had always, you learn in Al-Anon right off the bat about the 3 C's. I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I cannot cure it. And then I started learning about how I contribute to it, how I compromise myself, like all of these other C's that I do. I create chaos and confusion. And anyway, so I'm learning and growing, and another big layer has come off. And I started to recognize the neglect. Like I had gone through all of the, trauma, the traumatic things that happened, but I had never seen the neglect before. And then I started having to, really deal with that. And again, it wasn't just the neglect from my parents. It was the neglect of myself. And, weeding through that and making amends for that and really getting in my hula hoop and going inside of Krista. There's a lot of differences between AA and Al-Anon. A lot of it is the same. A lot of the concepts and principles and the steps and all of that is the same. But in AA, they talk about, we must have constant thought of others. Well, that almost killed me because that became an obsession for me. Constant thought of others kept me living outside in. And in Al-Anon, I learned how to go in. I need to go in and look around in there. Who am I? What do I feel? What do I think? What am I feeling? And disregard them entirely. And start building a relationship with Krista and with my higher power. And not that I didn't build a relationship with my higher power in AA, because I certainly did. And like I said before, there could have been none of this could have happened had I not gotten sober first. That was the foundation for my recovery. And from there, Al-Anon has really helped me with my emotional sobriety. And really digging into what that means to me, and what does it mean to be emotionally sober, and not be feeling everybody's feelings for them or trying to control outcomes. And that's been most of my journey in Al-Anon, is about letting go of the control. I just had no idea how mired in control I was, and who would I be if I let go of this control? I didn't even know that I was doing it. A lot of times whenever I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I know I need to go to a meeting. Which one am I going to go to? Do I feel homicidal or suicidal? Am I entitled or am I a victim? So a lot of times I feel appalled, which is a little bit of both. I love to be appalled. And so, really being active in both of those programs. What I know about that phrase in AA about having constant thought of others is that, Bill wrote that, and he doesn't have what we have. So he was basing that on the facts that he's assuming that you are you're centered in self, you are spiritually sound, and you are giving from the overflow, not the mother load. But I did not know that. And so I was always giving from the mother load. There was no overflow for me. And I had to learn that in Al-Anon. Some of the hardest things that I have learned in Al-Anon is about letting people have their own feelings and watching people have their own experiences and watching people run towards the wall as fast as they can with scissors in their hand and being like, letting go and not saying anything. It feels like sitting there and watching somebody circling the drain and they're just going down and down and down and you're like, you're going to hit okay, look away. And trusting that they have a higher power. Trusting that God is working in their life and that this is the help. Stop trying to control how the help comes. So backing up, I've got an Al-Anon sponsor. I'm learning a lot. I'm growing a lot. And then one day I just had this come apart. And I called her and I was like, I don't know what's going on with me, but I can't stop crying. I'm having anxiety attacks. And I feel like I don't know anything about recovery anymore. I just feel lost, like I'm about to spin off the planet. And she said to me, you may not be falling apart. You could be falling together. And I think that was so true. Things started really kind of clicking in for me. And what I didn't know then that I know now was that some of this was brought on by my marriage. My marriage was starting to fall apart, and we decided to separate 40 days ago. And nobody did anything wrong. Nobody's mad. We are uncoupling. We're doing some uncoupling. We have this business together. I think we're going to keep the business together. And we're walking through this, and we're being really kind to each other. And this is the most adult thing I have ever done in my entire life. And I would not be able to do this if it were not for a really strong program, both programs, and really strong sponsorship. And, we just kind of sat down and we said, we have this beautiful business together. We have a beautiful life. We really like each other, but I don't know if we're in love anymore. And I don't know if a lot of this is working anymore. Nobody is the boss of us. We can do anything that we want, especially in AA. You see people, they get married and divorced to the same people 5 or 6 times. It's like, if they can do that, we can do this. And so I can tell you that he moved out 2 weeks ago, and he's at the house right now, babysitting the dogs. And he cut up a tree that fell in the backyard. And whenever I come home on Sunday, he'll go back to his place, and we will go to work on Monday. And we are. It's just amazing to me. It's just amazing to me. And we're both kind of we're in grief, about that. And we're feeling our feelings on time, which is super inconvenient for me. I don't love that. I don't love the crying in meetings. But I do it. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be able to feel the vastness of my emotions today. And not have to distract them away, or not have to drink them away, or not have to busy them away, or all the things that I have done in the past. I know today that all that busyness is a hedge against the emptiness. And I don't have that. I don't have that deep soul emptiness anymore. Whenever I reach down inside, I can feel my higher power today. And the way that has happened for me is through a lot of gathering evidence that there is a God. The more I look for God, the more I find God. The more I look for evidence that I am God, the bigger Krista, being my own higher power, gets, which is not good. I feel like, my experience in recovery is that, God never gives us anything full grown. He gives us seeds. And I have planted those seeds in sunny spots, and I have given them a lot of water. And then God's got to do the growing. And my part is about letting them grow and not pulling them up every 15 minutes and looking at the roots and putting them back in there, like really sitting on my hands and breathing and just living one day at a time and doing the next right things. And that's where I am now. I've never been this old. I've never, I've not uncoupled before. I have not, I don't know, I'm in a new season of my life, 52, I feel like I'm into the next chapters of my life. But I'm so grateful to have a purpose. I'm so grateful to have a place to go. I'm so grateful to have a family of choice. I'm so grateful that I get to come and meet people from all over the world that think and feel like me. I'm grateful that we have this language together. Sandy Beach said that people affected by alcoholism, and this means alcoholics and Al-Anons, people that have been affected by the disease of alcoholism have an appalling lack of perspective and misplaced responsibility. And left to our own, that is. But by working the steps and the traditions and the concepts and all the things and letting myself be sponsored, a lot of that has changed. I have help with my perspective. And I'm not a walking victim anymore. And I know how to take responsibility, and I know how to let you have responsibility for you. And I'm fully responsible for my big, beautiful life, and I can let you have yours, uncolored by my fears and my expectations and the movie that I'm shining on your face, and literally let you have your life as it should be between you and your higher power, and keep the focus on me. And I'm just eternally grateful for both of my programs. I'm glad to be here. I think I might be done, Lance. Thank you.